Hi, Adam, if you can hear
Hey
us.
guys. Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey.
Yeah, I can hear you
Yeah, we
great.
can hear you.
Cool. How's it going?
Great.
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You guys sequestered in your quarantine spots?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm out in
Cool.
Pennsylvania right now, which is it's not where my family's from or where I'm from or anything. I'm at my girlfriend's house, so it's kind of a
Cool.
weird spot. But yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
I'm locked down in Chicago right now, so perfect.
Nice. How's the vibe where you guys are?
Um, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely I think my girlfriend's family is getting a little stir crazy. It's like two
hmm
10 and 12-year-old kids, then me and her, and then her parents. And it's just there's so yeah.
That's a lot. It's a
Anxiety.
lot to deal with.
Yeah, but I mean, we've been here like a month now, so
Wow.
I'm used to it. But
Yeah. I mean, it'll definitely be something. It'll be a defining thing for our time for sure.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not something that we see repeated a lot.
yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, thanks for reaching out.
yeah, absolutely. No, I'm super excited we were able to do this.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, this is Maddie. She's on the board with our club, and she's hopping in to help me ask questions and stuff.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Nice to meet you.
It's cool. Yeah, likewise. It's cool you guys are doing this. We definitely didn't have anything like this. I went to NYU
Mhm.
uh, a while ago, but it's cool to hear that you guys have a club like that. That wasn't really a thing that we, considered doing when we were in school.
Yeah, we
Or
really we've had it going for like 2 years now, but I started running it this past school year, and it
hmm
wasn't really doing a lot before that, but especially this quarter with all of the craziness going on,
hmm
it's been weirdly easier to organize things because nobody's doing anything. So,
yeah.
yeah, people that we might
Who
not.
else have you guys? Who else have you guys spoken to? Anyone?
So you're the first person
Um,
we're talking to, but we're talking to
Cool.
Andrew Wehde, shot 8th grade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he's a DePaul grad, which was cool. I
Nice.
didn't know that until I was reaching out, but
That's awesome. That's so
yeah.
funny.
So I'm
Right
talking
on.
in a couple days. But
Cool. Right on.
yeah, no, we're trying to make this a regular thing for the next couple months as just a way of supplementing, since there's really nothing else going on that we can do as a program.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right on.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, no. So if you're down, I think we should hop right into it.
Yeah, go for it. Whatever you guys want.
Maddie, you want to start?
most important question to start with. Have you picked up any fun hobbies during quarantine?
Well, I get to be home, which is something that is very anomalous for me. I spend most of my time on the road, and I feel like I probably, when I'm normally working, I spend, maybe a few days a month at home. And so it's been kind of surreal to be here for such an extended period of time. It's funny, I actually had just left to start a TV show in Canada that I was going to be gone. I was going to be gone for almost 7 months on this TV show, and so it's really surreal to have packed all my belongings and kind of said goodbye to my partner and my home and my dog. And you know, it was a really big decision, like life decision, to do this. I've never worked on a project for that long, and then literally 4 days into it, they sent us home. So it was this really like intense emotional period of deciding I was going to do this big thing and then immediately being turned around. But I mean, I've been enjoying. I live in Oregon, in Portland, and I've been really enjoying just like cooking and doing yard work and housework, and like I'm kind of a homebody, which doesn't really link up with my profession. So I'm honestly kind of reveling in this time right now.
I feel that. I'm from Seattle,
Oh,
so
nice,
super familiar with that area. Yeah,
cool,
awesome.
yeah. No, I love it. I grew up in a small town called Corvallis, and then I went to NYU for undergrad and ended up staying in New York for a long time. And I just moved back to Oregon a few years ago.
Nice. Was New York kind of where you started working, or were you?
Yeah, New York is kind of where I started my career, and then um, I'd kind of always in the back of my head wanted to leave the city and just sort of do my own thing. But I felt like I needed to really establish myself and get to a point where people would be willing to travel me. And what happened was I was shooting so many projects that were travel projects that it really didn't matter where I lived. You know, I was living in New York, but working all over the world. And it was kind of like I would come home to New York and it was just loud and stressful and expensive. And I was like, why am I coming home to this place? So I just decided to pack up and move to Oregon. And it's worked out pretty well for
Good. Yeah.
Nice.
I feel like that's nice just to have like you said, just to have a home that is not also chaotic because the job is so chaotic. I'm
me.
sure
Yeah.
that area, Oregon and the West Coast.
No, it's nice, and it's kind of important to me. I feel like, you know, a lot of people in the film industry, I think pretty much everyone I know would consider themselves workaholics, and we kind of we really center our life around that. And I think it's important to stay balanced, because I think once if you lose perspective and you're just working all the time, then you kind of lose yourself a little bit, and it's really easy to kind of forget why you're doing what you're doing, and you kind of lose. At least for me, I lost a lot of my inspiration being in New York, you know, because I just felt like I was just there to work and do the thing, and I sort of forgot who I was and what I cared about. And I think that's so important for our industry, is like, you know, embracing who you are and where you come from and what your perspective on the world is.
Of course. So you said you started your career in New York. What kind of was like the start of your career? Did you like come up like grip and electric or like camera background, or were you just like hopping right into cinematography?
So I went to NYU for undergrad. I shot a ton of student films, and I befriended a lot of upperclassmen who were DPs. I kind of knew very early on that I wanted to be a DP, so I sort of just bugged as many DPs at NYU as I could. And you know, a lot of them took me under their wing, and I learned a lot from them. And as they left school to enter the workforce, they would sort of throw me jobs they didn't want. So I'd end up shooting little music videos or commercials, like really small stuff, and just sort of building my resume, my portfolio. And I did a little bit. I did a lot of crew work while I was at NYU. I mean, I did everything from PAing to, you know, to camera work to grip and electric, and I enjoyed all of that. I love being on set, and I learned a lot. But I kind of wanted to just see if I could slide right into shooting, and I was more excited about shooting than I was necessarily crewing. And I think there's no right way to do this. There's so many different paths you can take, which is pretty obvious. And I think for me, I was given enough opportunities to shoot stuff, even if it was stuff I wasn't that excited about. I just took every opportunity I could and just tried to get what I could out of it, you know. And that just led to slowly building on bigger and bigger projects. And I think music videos were a big part of that. Just getting the chance to work on music videos was great. And I think at the time, you know, there was this weird sweet spot in music videos where there was still a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. And so I was able to work on what I felt were like slightly higher visibility music videos, and getting that stuff on my reel was a really good way to show people that, you know, I could think creatively with a small budget. And, you know, music videos tend to like circulate pretty well. So my work was able to like kind of get out into the world.
Do you think working on music videos continued your like creative trajectory in terms of just how you thought about things?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I love music videos, and I'm a huge music lover. And for me, I've always loved doing music videos. It's difficult because the budgets are so small, and the ambitions are often so high that they don't really align, and they're really backbreaking work, and you often don't make very much or any money on them. So it can be kind of frustrating in that it's not the most sustainable way to like make a living. But I think, you know, for me, again, it's all about that balance. You know, if I just focused on making money, I could shoot commercials my entire life and make a great living wage, and, you know, I could get by like that. But it's directors and work with new tools, and just like really explore. I think that's really important. So I mean, I still do music videos. I think they're still like a super important part of my career.
So how did you
Could
make
you guys
the
hear me? Was I breaking up there? My
No,
internet
you were
is kind of,
perfect. Uh,
oh, cool.
so how did you make the transition from doing stuff like music videos into like larger scale stuff like say a feature and stuff like that?
Um, I had actually directed a music video that I made right when I got out of college, and a director that I really liked saw it, and he wanted to work with me after he saw it because he knew I was a DP, and so we started working together, and we shot a couple music videos together, and then from there we shot our first feature together. It's my buddy who's now a really close friend of mine. This guy Ben Dickinson. We've done a couple movies together on a bunch of commercials and music videos. But I think like the film industry is funny because there are a lot of paths to get to where you want to be, but at the end of the day you kind of have to make your own path, and a lot of it is just like faking it and lying, and not necessarily lying, but just like it is definitely like that fake until you make it sort of thing. And I still feel that way sometimes when I show up on set. I'm like, someone's trusting me to do this right now. I've never done this before, but I'm just going to pretend like I know how to do it, surround myself with a good crew, and we'll figure it out. I think that's like an important sentiment of filmmaking, is that like we're all just out there trying to increase our knowledge and our skill and take risks and sort of evolve the industry and evolve the art form. So yeah, I was, Ben took a small risk on me by hiring me to shoot his first movie, because I'd only never done short films and really low budget stuff. And what we did was a really low budget film, so it kind of worked out, and it was a good way to cut my teeth. And then when I first shot that first movie, it premiered at Tribeca, and I got my first agent, and they got me my next movie, and then it kind of just slowly started to evolve from there.
When was all that happening? Like what's been the trajectory?
I think I shot that. So that movie was called First Winter. That was the first feature that I ever shot. And I did that in like, I want to say that was like 2011. So it was like a couple years after I graduated from NYU. And then my next movie after that, All the Wilderness, I think was a year or two after that. And then after All the Wilderness, I'm trying to remember what I did. The thing is, I don't, as much as like I entered this industry to make movies and shoot movies, I've been fairly specific with the projects that I work on, just because I know that you're often only judged by the last movie you did. It's something that I've kind of come to discover, especially as like a burgeoning cinematographer. Resumes are a really tricky thing, and it can be really easy to just sort of like oversaturate your portfolio with work, but that doesn't always say what you want it to say about the work you want to do. And so for me, I've always been sort of particular about the projects I want to shoot, so that they sort of speak to the kind of things I want to be doing. And it's always that balance of like stepping out of my comfort zone and taking risks and doing projects that I'm not sure about versus doing projects I really know I want to do. And I think my whole career has been a process of building on what I've done and trying to manifest a career that I'm excited about, because it's really interesting. The film industry is funny in that you're often hired to do what you've already done, especially in the commercial world, but also in the filmmaking world. There's this idea that like, making a film is a huge investment of time and money, and there's a lot of emotional energy that's put into it, and there's a lot at stake for the filmmakers, and so they want to make sure that they're hiring a team that like knows how to execute what they're doing. And so a lot of times they'll look for people who've already done something similar to it, which makes it really hard. It's like a really good example I have is like when you see car commercials, it's almost always shot by a car DP, someone who shoots cars. That's like what they're good at, and I always kind of wanted to shoot car commercials for a number of different reasons. I thought they were cool. You get to play with a lot of fun tools, you get paid well, but it was really hard to get into it because I never had a car commercial to begin with. And it's like one of those things where it's like, my agent would be like, you need to have a car commercial on your reel in order to get car commercial work. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get that if no one ever gives it to me. You know, it's like that thing of like the chicken or the egg. And so there's a bit of that going on in the film world in general. And I think it's like, what I found is that you have to find people that want to take a risk on you and that trust you as a human and as a like co-collaborator, that like they understand your vision. That was a very circuitous long answer. I'm not sure what the question was anymore.
No,
But.
that makes sense. We wanted to ask, I couldn't find anything on your website in regards to union membership or anything like that. Are you part of 600 or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm part of 600. It's pretty much like mandatory for the kind of work that I do.
Right.
And I remember I joined because there was a movie called Barry that I did a few years ago. And it was a union film. And so in order to shoot it, I had to be union. And so I had to get all my paperwork together and prove that I worked a certain amount of hours in the past year and pay the heinously exorbitant fee to enter it as a DP. Yeah, so yes, I'm in 600.
How are you liking it since you joined? I mean, it's been a while, I guess, but.
I think the union is really good for some members of my film community and not as beneficial for others. You know, there's a lot of discussion right now about it because of coronavirus. And one of the main issues is healthcare. And like the healthcare that they provide is great, but someone like a DP often doesn't even qualify for it because they don't work enough hours. People like for example, I work, you know, even if I'm busy, I'm maybe only shooting 2 or 3 commercials a month. So I'm not on set for like, I'm not working like a 40-hour work week, like, or 60-hour work week, like a lot of my assistants work, you know, like the ACs, the gaffers, all those guys that I work with, when they're not shooting with me, they're on another project, you know, they're bouncing around. Whereas with me, it's like, I'm hired for the specific jobs the directors want me for, and I'm still super busy, but I'm not necessarily on set all the time. A lot of my job is like, you know, emailing, phone calls, prepping, doing stuff that isn't technically on the clock. And so oftentimes I don't qualify for the benefits. And the tricky part is, you know, if you don't qualify in the quarter, like you qualify one quarter and you get the healthcare, if you don't qualify the next quarter, you have to, you know, go on Cobra, and then you have to pay basically what you don't get the benefits for free. You have to pay something for it. So I actually have my own health insurance that I pay for, which is not nearly as good, but I just don't want to ever have to worry about losing my healthcare.
Right.
But like, you know, there's certain things that the union does that really protect its workers in terms of like hours and turnaround time, and just certain like wage protections that I think are really important, especially for like, you know, the ACs, like the camera department, the grip and electric department, who are working, you know, obviously grip and electric is in a different union, but just on principle, you know, they're protecting work hours and keeping people safe. So I think it's important, but I think that there's a lot of growth to be had, especially as the industry is just changing so rapidly, you know, and I think like we're seeing that there's way more people in the industry now. There are way more DPs. There's way more content being made. And I think the union is struggling to keep up with that, and struggling to really support all of its members. So I think there's going to be a big sea change, especially after the coronavirus stuff dies down. So yeah, it's tricky, and you know, I'm in sort of a privileged position where I can like afford to take care of myself outside of it. But you know, there are a lot of members of the film industry right now that are like suffering and don't really have the support that they need to not be working for the next however many months, you know.
Yeah, we've had a lot of friends out back home in Chicago that are in exactly what you're talking about, where it's like they're either a year out of school, right last year of school, or within that 5-year thing where they haven't got themselves set up enough or just got their first season gig or something.
Yeah.
And it's like dropped.
I have 2 people in the other room right now who are currently out of work because the union isn't going right now in Chicago.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, the whole film industry is basically unemployed right now. I mean, it's like 250,000 people that just don't have work. you know, and I don't think anyone was prepared for that, especially because the industry was really booming up until then, you know, like
Yeah.
things were really good. I don't think anyone had really any worries. And, you know, I think for people who are just starting out, it's got to be incredibly difficult. You know, I'm lucky enough that I have projects that I know that I'm going to kind of return to when this all settles down, but a lot of people don't have that. And it's scary. And like I have friends who have kids and, you know, partners who don't work, who are taking care of the kids. And it's really, it's a scary time. And I think I'm also like a bit worried that some of these streaming platforms and some of these content producers are going to really streamline their approach after this, whereas before it was like kind of this like, it was just the market was kind of oversaturated and everyone was making content, everyone was just throwing so much money down on the table, and like there was just so much being made that like I'm very curious to see if that's going to remain that way when everything comes back, or if people are going to kind of ease up and be a little bit more cautious and wary. I'm hoping that we'll just kind of slam right back into it, and fortunately like all the streaming platforms are doing pretty well right now because no one has anything to do but watch content.
Yeah.
but we'll see.
I was doing the math.
Like a weird time.
I was doing the math yesterday with my partner on how much money that Trolls sequel is doing, because it just got
Yeah.
released like entirely online. And based on what they've announced, they didn't announce exact numbers, but we did it up and it sounded like around 150 million.
Yeah.
Wild. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm
crazy.
really curious if the release schedule of things and just the style of release is going to change afterwards.
I think for sure. I think we're learning a lot from it. I don't know if it's going to benefit film workers. But you know, only time will tell. It's hard to say. But I think it's clear that like movies and TV shows aren't going to go out of style, you know, and that people want that content and people want to continue to produce that content. And you know, people still respond to like really good, honest filmmaking, and that's really important. You know, the industry has survived a lot of kind of the more ridiculous novelties, like all the 3D stuff, and you know, the theatrical thing is a little bit tricky. It's a little scary to think that like our movies might not be in theaters in the years to come. But you know, we do have to evolve with the times, and I think we have to accept that, and like, you know, still champion theaters. And I think we still have to keep going to movie theaters, and I think we forget that sometimes. But yeah, things are definitely going to change, and I think it's also up to us to help inform that change.
Totally. I think related to that, just in regards to shooting for screen versus shooting for home, I mean, what was that transition like for you in regards to like your features and then moving into like Euphoria or the show that you were about to start?
Yeah. It's interesting. I never really like envisioned myself doing much or any TV. Like I got into the industry wanting to make movies. I wasn't really raised on TV. I think part of it is I was raised in the woods and we like didn't have cable, and like we would like get VHS tapes and watch movies, you know, and like it was always like there was always an event around it. There wasn't a lot of like sitting around and watching TV shows. That just wasn't something we did a lot as a family. And so I never really got into like serialized stories like that. But obviously, like television has gotten way more interesting, way more exciting, and I think in a lot of ways a lot more sophisticated than movies often can be, because you get like the ability to tell a story over this huge arc of time, which is just incredible. And so I got excited by that, and you know, I did Euphoria partially because I was excited about Euphoria because I was able to like dip my toes in TV without like committing to an entire season, because like they shot for almost, you know, the whole show was almost like a year of shooting, you know, which is just like an intense commitment of time, especially for something that like I didn't know was going to be a hit or not. And you know, I personally couldn't tell if it was something I was going to love or not when I first dipped in. I was really excited about it, and it posed a lot of challenges, but you know, some of these projects you don't really understand until you get to know the people involved. And once I like started to really get to know Sam, the showrunner, producer, director, writer, and then all the cast, I was just like, okay, this is going to be incredible. And I really realized how much these people elevated it. So for me, I think I kind of just my brain thinks like a movie, you know. I think the same way a lot of ours does. The way like we imagine things is just very cinematic. And so for me, I don't think I shot Euphoria with television in mind. You know, Sam really wanted to shoot it like a movie, and I think we accomplished that. And so my way of thinking doesn't really shift dramatically. Um, it really just my way of thinking really just shifts from project to project. I don't, you know, I think, you know, anytime I've ever interviewed for a TV show, and especially the show I was about to do, you know, the discussions we had are like, this is a movie broken out into 8 pieces, you know, and we're going to shoot it like a movie. It's going to be more of a single camera approach. It's going to be cinematic. It's not going to be like over covered, you know. And I think that's what people expect now. You know, they expect a cinematic movie going experience and compressed into an hour. So I think there's really not like there's not like a big mindset shift from movies to TV.
What was it like moving from I mean, coming into something that had a pre-established style like Euphoria had? Like, was there any conversation between you and the other DPs beforehand?
Um,
That was like,
there was a little bit of conversation, not as much as I had expected or kind of hoped at the time, but I think in retrospect it was kind of good, because there were 3 other DPs before me, and everyone was either like already on another project, or they were shooting and really busy, or they weren't available. So I kind of just got thrown into it, and I spoke a lot with the crew that was on it, had been on through the entire show, and they were kind of like the torch carriers. You know, they knew what tools we were using, and sort of like the general approach to a lot of things that sort of helped me not have to stress about a lot of the minutia. And so for me, it was about understanding Sam's vision for the show, and, you know, taking what was already done and then like funneling it through my own perspective, you know. And I think it's that balance of like honoring what's already there, and like the language that's already been built, and then like adding something new to it, and like trying to elevate it. So that was, and Sam was like incredibly motivating in that, like he really pushed me to always make it better and reinterpret things and push things. And it was like to the point where like, you know, we just did things I never could have imagined, and it was because of him. You know, it was like, if you had just set me off to do things, I wouldn't have done them the way that we did them. But Sam really like pushed us to like think differently and to come up with new ideas and new shots and new lighting. And it was a really beautiful thing where like I was pushed to the brink of like my knowledge and my capabilities, that like we couldn't help but create something new and different. You know, it wasn't about replicating anything that had been done before.
Mhm. So whether I'm either like gaffing or shooting something, I feel like I've been asked a lot recently to like recreate the like Euphoria style. And I mean, the way you're
Uh-huh.
talking is like it's just constantly pushing and doing like bigger and better things. Do you think that is a style that you can like recreate or mimic, or is it something that's so like just ingrained in the show and the universe of the show?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's tough because there are so many facets of what we do. You know, there's lighting, there's lensing, there's camera movement, there's blocking. There's just like so many different, and that show has iconic versions of all of those things, I think. But I think, you know, one thing for us, it was like there was always like this. You know, it was never said out loud, but to me, there was always just this idea of maximalism. It's like, what's the most you could possibly do in this scenario? You know, like, why isn't there a light there? Why isn't the camera moving here? Like, why isn't this happening? You know, it was a bit of that, you know. So I think that to me was sort of like the mantra of like, what am I missing here? What could be elevated that isn't elevated right now? And so I think look wise, there's a lot of like iconic things that people think about in terms of camera movement and lighting, and especially like color of lighting, that like is very popular and like people tend to like gravitate towards. I think the colors are really like vibrant and, you know, lean towards certain color palettes, and I think people really loved that. And that's something that like Marcel, who shot the pilot and like the first few episodes, him and Sam really established beautifully. And like it was nice to be able to take that palette, and then like when I shot my episodes, I tried to introduce other little pops of color and like different colors we hadn't seen before. But yeah, I mean, I think like as far as replicating, it's hard to say. I mean, people can say, "Oh, you're replicating the Euphoria style," but like I'll pick out shots from Euphoria and say we stole that shot from this movie. You know what I mean? Like I can like go through the episodes and be like, oh, this shot is from The Cranes Are Flying, you know, or this shot is from, you know, a Paul Thomas Anderson film. Like it's all like we're all just students and we're all learning and progressing and like trying to evolve the art form.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry, Maddie, go ahead.
Oh, you can continue, Miles.
You mentioned just maximalism and that as a thought creatively. Would you say that that expands outside of Euphoria and the other stuff you've done, or just was that a Euphoria specific thing, or?
That was pretty Euphoria specific. That was actually my biggest challenge with Euphoria is that like at first when I first started shooting it, I just always felt like we were doing too much. You know what I mean? Like especially coming from like a very scrappy indie background, especially shooting in New York where it's like hard to get resources. It's, you know, the locations are really tight. You don't have a lot to work with and you're just kind of given, you just work with the tools you're given. Euphoria was kind of the opposite where it was like, okay, you have all the opportunities and tools available to you and you have a ton of time. What are you going to do? Like that to me was almost more stressful than being given like a small budget in a short amount of time, you know, because it's just like it's up to me to make those decisions and to create a world that owns up, you know, that sort of like that lives up to everything that we want it to be. So I think for me, like I'm much more minimalist, and I think like lighting wise, compositionally, camera movement wise, I'm much more restrained usually, and I'm much more thoughtful is not the right word, but I tend to like be very restrained and then find moments to like create some sort of flurry. Whereas Euphoria was just like a constant flurry, if that makes sense. So that was definitely a challenge for me, and I think like it was a fun challenge because Sam really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it was really difficult at times, and it was like frustrating at times, but it was really rewarding. And I think like in general, like most of the projects I've done that I'm most proud of or that people respond to most are those situations where I go into a project thinking I know what I'm doing and have a perfect grasp of how things should go, and then I get pushed beyond my comfort zone and I have to really like take risks and do things I'm not familiar or comfortable with. Like that's always when the best work happens, and I think I've learned to sort of embrace that, and I've learned to look for collaborators that push me in that direction, because I think it's really easy to play it safe and to kind of do what you know and do it well, but you'll find very quickly that you get tired and bored of that, you know, and your work starts to stagnate. And I think like I don't know if you guys have seen The Last Black Man in San Francisco, the last movie I did, but that was like a perfect example of doing a project where like, you know, the director and I really trusted each other and we have a lot of respect for each other, but like we also at the same time like really pushed each other to evolve our vision for the film. And I think in doing so, like we created something that neither of us actually kind of could totally picture in our heads, you know?
Mm-hmm. We both actually rewatched Last Black Man in San Francisco like 2 days ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, in preparation for this. And
Nice.
it's a beautiful film.
Thank you.
How did like that process come to be? Like, did you know the director beforehand, or I think or maybe yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I had seen Joe's short film at Sundance. I wasn't at Sundance, but I had seen his short film that played at Sundance like a couple of years ago, and I thought it was incredible. And I just saw like a lot of raw talent in his vision for filmmaking, which once I like kind of researched him, I realized that like he hadn't made a lot of other things, but that he was like very dedicated to this other movie that he really wanted to do called The Last Black Man in San Francisco that he'd been trying to make. And I think they made the short film to kind of like, so he could cut his teeth directing and get a little bit more exposure, which was very successful. And so I basically just like worked with my agent to track him down and tell him that I loved his work and that I wanted to work with him. And it took forever to get me an interview with him. But I finally did. And it was a lot of back and forth and talking about what I saw for the film, what he saw for the film, and, you know, him courting a lot of other DPs. And, you know, at the end of the day, I got the job. And I think neither of us knew for sure how it was going to turn out and how things were going to go. But it just kind of, it was a really hard shoot. It was one of the hardest shoots I've ever done. It was really challenging and we really pushed each other, but it became this sort of beautiful thing that was, the sum was so much greater than all of its parts, you know.
I had heard that you got brought onto that pretty late in the pre-production process.
Yeah, it was tricky because so Joe, like I had been talking to Joe and he had already, by the time I spoke to him, he was already talking to another DP who was based in Europe, who had shot a lot of one of our favorite directors' films, this guy Aki Kaurismäki, the Finnish director. His DP was interested in shooting Joe's movie. And I was kind of like, I was desperate to shoot this movie and I was really pushing for it. And so I was just like doing anything I could to keep talking to Joe. And finally it came to a point where he couldn't even hire the other guy if he wanted to because of like permit issues. And so I was able, it basically opened up the opportunity for me to jump in. But by that point, it was like 2 weeks before the shoot was going to start. So I was officially hired like 2 weeks before the movie started, which was like a crazy tight prep process. And fortunately, I had spoken to Joe a lot before then, just kind of like in the interviewing process. And I had gone over the script so many times that, you know, it wasn't like I was brought in cold. Like I knew what was going on, but it was still just like, I've never prepped anything I've never shot a movie with so little prep in my life. It was insane.
I wondered, there was one thing that I was talking to another friend of ours who's the VP of the club. He was really, really struck by, in particular, all of the bus stop stuff. And he had heard that you could just like put up like 6 or 7 HMIs and just like blasted. Like, I think his question was basically like, where did that idea come from? What was the motivation behind that? What was going on there in prep and during?
I think it was a mix of things. I think, you know, aesthetically for the movie, we wanted something that was a little bit larger than life, and that, you know, it was tricky because we wanted to portray these guys in a really particular light. I think like we wanted to avoid certain familiar tropes of like popular culture, and we wanted to kind of create icons in a way. And I think in doing that, we wanted something that felt nostalgic, but also really modern. Because Joe is like kind of this like, as a director and as a human, he's like very nostalgic, and he's a hopeless romantic, and he loves old movies, and he's just like, the way he thinks is very romantic. And so he wanted something different. He didn't want like the like stereotypical indie, like dark, moody, brooding, like, you know, polemic type film that we often see these days about people who are in situations that are like the people in poverty, or people who are like struggling, or like people that are outcast in society. I think that's like a really familiar world that has been sort of celebrated in the indie film world, and like a lot of the movies end up looking the same. And so he wanted something a lot different. And so, you know, and he was also very aware that like most of our cast is Black, and he wanted to make sure we saw their faces really well, and that they were always lit, and that we could get their performances. So we did a little bit of like, you know, we did a lot of talking about references, and Aki Kaurismäki, the Finnish director we talked about, came up a lot. And in his work, he does a lot of like very sort of surreal lighting that is like very motivated off of existing lighting, and it's often in like very banal situations, but the lighting just feels like so impressionistic and so beautiful and sort of like shocking in a way, where you're like, I know this location, this is a bus stop, or this is a restaurant that I've seen a million times, this is a gas station I've seen a million times, but it just feels heightened in some way. So I think we wanted to do that. And so, you know, it was funny because literally we shot the first scene of the movie on the first day of shooting, and there's that preacher on the soapbox who's like preaching, and then they're sitting at the bus stop watching him. And we framed it up, and I had some like bounce a little bit of light into the preacher's face, and the gaffer was like flipping the bounce around, and there was a silver like mirror side to it, and the sunlight reflected off it and hit the preacher's face in this way that was just like magic, and it looked totally unreal. But Joe was like, what was that? I want that. He's like, that's the movie. And so I was like, I looked at my gaffer and I was like, I was kind of pissed that he had done that because I'm like, fuck, did not want him to see that. And so we flipped it back over and like front lit him really hard, and it looked amazing. And I couldn't help but just agree with Joe that it looked really like special and unique. And so we took that sentiment and sort of applied it to everything. And that we, whenever we could, we sort of front lit people to make them pop out of these locations and to also make them feel like iconic and feel more important than they normally would in these frames. And yeah, when we were outside, we would use like big HMIs, or we would use mirror boards. We definitely never had 6 or 7 HMIs because we never could have afforded that. But we would have like we'd have like one big 18K or like a 9K or a 4K just spotted directly in their face over the camera, or like if we were further away, we would use a mirror and just reflect the sun into their face.
I noticed that in the movie, there's a lot of like just a very flowy kind of camera throughout a lot of it, but then they're
Mm-hmm.
also like juxtaposed with like these super, I don't want to say harsh, but almost like harsher, like static shots. How did you
Mm-hmm.
choose like between the two and like when it emotionally felt right?
I think the script kind of just told us, you know what I mean? It was like, I think it was just whenever the story needed it, we would slow down or we would stop abruptly. And I think there was always this interplay with Jimmy and Mon's characters that like, there's that beauty that they're sort of just roaming the city, and they're almost like, I always like thought of them like, they're kind of like these lone frontiersmen in this new like Western frontier. Um, and even though they're in a city, it's like a very lonely existence, and there's this sort of like cowboy-esque almost feeling that's like a Western, where it's very grandiose and very beautiful and very flowing. So I wanted to embrace their vision of the city, which is also Joe's vision as a director and as a human and as a San Franciscan. Like, Joe has a very poetic, romantic view of the city, and so we wanted to capture that. But then like juxtaposing that with like the harder cuts to like static frames, kind of slams us back into the immediate reality of their life and their obstacles and their struggles. So it's like, oh, it's like everything is fine, the world is beautiful, they live in a beautiful city, there's so much opportunity, and boom, no, they're actually like homeless and struggling to like hold on to something that's really important to them, or like, so it's all about just, I think a film language is sort of built out of juxtaposition. I think if you rely too heavily on one tool, you tend to desensitize an audience to that tool. It's like if you shoot an entire movie handheld, by the end of the movie you forget that it's handheld and it's kind of lost its meaning in some way. So I like to constantly like play with the audience's perspective and try to juxtapose things, and always try to like, you know shake things up while also keeping the audience's trust. I think that's the delicate balance of being like, this is still the same movie, but I need you to feel a different way now. I need you to see things differently.
Going off of that, I feel like with that movie, when it came out, everybody was like, it shows San Francisco as a character, and like that was a big phrase going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, first of all, if that sentence or a form of that was brought up at all during or before the shoot, or like just how you go about translating the like, I want this to feel like a character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Joe it was very like obvious from the get-go, and it wasn't something that he always said, but I think it was, to him, it was just like a no-brainer. Um, and for him, I think the house was more of the character, and to the point where like as we continue to shoot, he was like, I need to like, he wanted to almost like anthropomorphize the house. Like there's the opening montage where Jimmy's skating, and it's talking about like, we have shots of Jimmy's eyes while he's skating, and then we zoom into like 2 windows in the house that almost look like eyes, or like we see Jimmy's hat, and then we see the witch hat of the house. Like there's that, and then we see like Jimmy's gold necklace, and then we cut to like the gold embellishment on the house. Like that was really important to connect the house as a character. And then I think the city as a character was one of those things again that just sort of happened naturally. Like it was a no-brainer. It was obvious that San Francisco was an incredibly important aspect of the film, and we didn't really have to say it out loud. We just knew that we needed to portray it in a really specific way that was honest to how not only Joe saw it, but the characters saw it.
So I was curious about the aspect ratio for it. It was 1:6:6, and I feel like I don't see that very often, but to me it felt like
Hmm.
very reminiscent of like medium format photography. Was
Yeah.
that your choice or was that already decided when you were brought on?
Yeah, no, that was something I wanted to do, and I brought to Joe, and he was into it. And I think we talked about aspect ratio a lot, and we went through like we shot we shot tests in different aspect ratios, especially like in the house, just to see how the house translated. And I felt like I don't know, a lot of my favorite movies are in 1:6:6, and I think it comes from like a specific time period in filmmaking when it was just used a lot. And it was used by a lot of cinematographers and directors that I love, and I've just like I really gravitate towards those frames. So there was a bit of that, like a bit of that homage to films that we love, and then the other part was, yeah, I wanted the film to feel very photographic. There was like something about it to me that just screamed photographic, and I think that the boxier aspect ratio does that really well. And like you said, it feels like kind of like medium format in a way. And I didn't want to go so extreme to like 4:3 where it feels um, confining and oppressive. Like I find I love composing for 4:3, but I often find it feels kind of suffocating, especially like watching it on anything except for a movie theater screen. Like a movie theater screen, I think you can get away with it more easily because you're not seeing like black bars, you're just seeing the image projected on a screen. But when you see it on a TV or a computer, you really feel the compression of the space, which can work really well. But for this movie, that's not what this movie is. So I wanted to do something that was a bit boxier, but not so boxy that it drew too much attention to itself. And I think also the boxier aspect ratio helps with sort of the verticality of the city and the verticality of the house.
Again, on the topic of like planning out styles
Sorry.
and all of that, how did you, what kind of thoughts are going into camera choice, lens choice, that kind of thing for you, particularly on that? So I feel like the primes that you used especially are so unique, and just like the close-ups in that movie stand out so much.
Yeah, one second. Oh, sorry, one second.
Sure.
Yeah, I definitely put a ton of thought into that, and we definitely did some tests. I think, especially with digital photography now, everyone's sort of leaning towards like older lenses and softer lenses and things that have more character. And while I totally get that on principle, I find it often to be like a little heavy-handed and distracting. So I actually like I opted for like really modern, sharp, crisp lenses that were very fast, so that I could get really shallow depth of field. I used Zeiss Master Primes, which for most people, like I think most people shy away from those lenses, especially on digital, because they are so sharp and so clean. But there was something about them that I really liked because there was like a certain immediacy to them, and also for close-ups, this focus is so shallow and lenses are so sharp that the fall off is really extreme. So the characters really pop out of the screen. I think when you use softer, older lenses, even if they're fast, if you have someone's face in focus, they're so soft that the roll off is like really slow, and you get this like everything kind of feels more the depth of field actually feels deeper, and I kind of wanted to avoid that. I wanted like more shallow depth of field. And then I also only used a couple different focal lengths. I used like for the most part I used a 27 millimeter and like I want to say a 16 or a 14 millimeter lens. And I think in doing that, you sort of create like a style and aesthetic that is more consistent and feels more photographic. I shoot a lot of photography with a rangefinder camera, and which is like, you're not looking through the lens, you're looking through like a little, optical viewfinder, and you're instead of like zooming or switching lenses all the time to change your frame, you're moving your body, you're moving into a different position. Like I'll shoot on a 35 for an entire day and never change a lens. And if I want a certain shot, I move to a certain place with my body and the camera to get that shot, as opposed to being like, oh, I can get that shot if I just go on a longer lens. It was all about working with the same couple lenses and just positioning ourselves to get the frame we wanted.
Mm.
And I did use a little bit of diffusion to take the edge off of the sharper master primes. which I think helped a lot, and I think gives it sort of its iconic sort of romantic look without being over the top. And then also having a really amazing like color grade with my colorist helped kind of ease off that digital feel that sharp lenses on an Alexa can often produce.
I had heard that that color process was pretty extensive. Can you talk through that, or just what that process was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was extensive on like a conceptual level. Like we didn't have a lot of time to do what we wanted to do, but I put a lot of thought into it ahead of time. And, I took a lot of photos on set and a lot of photos while we were scouting. And I was in constant communication with my colorist before the shoot. And we shot tests that we sent to him, and then he built LUTs for the camera that we could shoot with. So we had a pretty extreme LUT in the camera that really like changed the way the camera saw things, which was cool because it sort of tended to inform our wardrobe choices, our makeup choices, our location choices, even like paint color choices of painting the house. Like it really informed that stuff. So that sort of informed how we saw and how we dressed the world, which I think is really important. I think having that kind of perspective while shooting is really, really helpful. Like a lot of people end up shooting in like Rec 709 or just some standard LUT, which I did a lot when I first started shooting Alexa. And you tend to just make a lot of the same decisions over and over again, and like everything tends to look the same. But by applying this really extreme LUT, we were able to like see the world a little bit differently, and we found ourselves gravitating towards colors we normally wouldn't have, because like greens looked amazing and reds looked amazing and golds looked amazing in a way that like in Rec 709 we would have been like, I don't really want to look that way because that hill looks too green, like too blue green or something. So it really shaped our vision. And then in post we only had 5 days of color, which is like very, I mean, it's somewhat standard for an indie film, but it's really not enough time to color a movie the way I like to color movies. So it was a rush, but my colorist is amazing and he just fucking nailed it.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, but we did do a lot of like power window. We did like a lot of windowing faces to bring them out, and did a lot of like windowing skies to bring out detail. Like there was a lot of like very specific tracking work that was done to really make the image pop.
Had there been experiences on other shoots before that movie where you would have that much, I guess, prep time to think about color and talk to your colorist, or was that a pretty new experience for you?
Um, I had done it on the 2 films previous. I did it on a movie called Burn Country. We were able to shoot a lot of tests, and then I also did it on the movie Barry. But this one I actually like didn't. I had more time in some ways, but I didn't have as much time to like actually shoot physical tests on Last Black Man. Last Black Man, I had like an hour to shoot a little bit of footage with the actors and then ship it out to my colorist. With the other films, I was able to like shoot stuff, get LUTs back, tweak things, come back later. But like I think on the 2 films prior to that, I hadn't really like totally dialed in the color science that I liked with the Alexa. I was still figuring it out. And so I feel like on Last Black Man, I finally, like things started to really click for me.
For sure.
And I think also just like learning the process a bit more, like learning how to be like very concise with my colorist was really important, because I think we can throw a lot of references out into the world and be like, I want to look like this and this and this. And then the colorist is kind of confused and doesn't know where to go. And you end up a bit stuck. So I've been learning to be a lot more specific with what I want and need out of my color.
So I personally noticed in Last Black Man, like there were 2 colors that really stuck out to me, which were red and green. Was that just
Hmm.
due to like location and what was available, or did those like have any like emotional value behind them?
The red definitely, I think, had emotional significance for Joe, because that was just like Jimmy's shirt for the entire movie. And I think it's a color that Joe identifies with, and it's a very like San Franciscan color. And then the green just kind of came out of the fact that it was so lush there when we shot. There was so much vegetation. And we had insane weather for that entire shoot. We had like 25 days of just beautiful sunshine every single day. And I think it had like rained quite a bit earlier on in the winter. And so I've never seen California as lush as it was that spring. And so that, like, it was just, everything was green everywhere. And it really wasn't, it was kind of unanticipated. It was really amazing.
I know we should probably be wrapping up soon so we can, lock that hour in. But I want to ask everybody in the series going forward is just like, we talked about it a little bit just in terms of where the industry is at from here, or where we're going. But where do you see the future of cinematography right now? And like, how do you think we're going to be adjusting afterwards?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think everyone's starting to realize that like technology is such a small. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like the tech side of it is really like is really not that interesting to me. Like I'm always excited to use like the newest gear, and I experiment a lot with lenses and lights. But like at the end of the day, I think it's all about storytelling, and I think we realize that we all gravitate towards interesting stories that are well told. So like I don't see there being like an enormous shift in cinematography. I think my biggest fear is that like because there's so much content being made, companies are figuring out ways to really streamline production and to really like force us to do a lot with very little. And so I think that's the challenge, is like sticking up for ourselves and demanding that we need certain resources and time in order to execute the things we want to execute. I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think the best work will always come out of being challenged in that way. And I don't think that, given all the time and money in the world, I'm always going to make the best work. I don't think that's how it works. I think we work well under pressure, but I think it's going to be a constant challenge of like making good work when companies are like, oh, this is only going to be seen on a phone. Like, don't worry about it. Like, you don't need to light this as well. Or like, I know Quibi is doing the thing where they want to shoot stuff that's framed both horizontally and vertically, which I think is just like totally heinous and fucking awful. And I really hope Quibi does not succeed. It's just purely out of that fact. And like I get it, like everyone's trying to innovate and like everyone's trying to experiment, and I respect that. And like there are certain things I'm excited about and certain things that I'm not. But like I just really don't want technology to inform the filmmaking process, because that's not why we're here. And I think there's a bit of that happening, and I won't pretend like I know what's going to happen, but I think that's going to be our biggest challenge, is how we continue to make good work that's meaningful while technology is changing so rapidly. So my answer is a non-answer. The answer is I don't know, but we have to stick up for what we believe in, and I think we have to push for it. And I don't think it's about being old-fashioned, because that's not something I believe in either. Like I think we need to evolve with the times, but I think we need to continue to always remember what's important to us and be careful where we compromise.
Totally.
Awesome.
Maddie, do you have anything else you want to add? Or?
I think I'm good. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us, though.
I hope it was useful. I hope I didn't babble too much. I tend to do that.
I mean, that's what we're all here for, right?
Cool.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know. I'm curious to hear who else you guys interview.
For sure. Yeah, I'll keep you.
Now is a great time.
Exactly. I mean, that's why we're doing it.
Take advantage of it.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.